Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
There's a lot going on around us that we don't even realize until you start looking a little deeper. And when you do, you find answers and clues to help move your life forward, help you heal from many different things. I've learned so much from her. She is an amazing energy healer, shaman, Reiki practitioner. I mean, I could go on and on. She's also a nurse and studying to advance her career even more. So, I say that because for those who think this is kind of like woo stuff, she's got the medical cred as well. And I've had sessions with her and just opened my eyes to a lot and moved my life forward too. And we're going to speak with somebody that she's helped move their life forward as well. And she is Danielle Marie joining us on the program once again. How you doing today?
Wonderful. Thank you. Hello, everyone out there.
So good to have you back here and hear stories of, I'm gonna guess, stories of healing, stories of aha moments, figuring out what we're dealing with now in our lives. And we all deal with stuff. Doesn't matter who you are, rich, poor, busy, not. We got things going on. A lot of times, as we've discussed, it goes back to your past, your childhood, things that you experienced back then or along the way impacts you now, but you might not even know what those things are. You're trying to figure it all out. Who do we have with us today? This is somebody you worked with, right?
Yes, this is Mr. Chuck Garrison, and he had his first session this morning.
Oh, okay. So I thought this was going on for a while. Oh, how interesting.
Well, it will be going on for a while, Steve. Thank you very much. And I feel much better now than when I walked in at 8 o'clock this morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about because I remember very vividly when I had a session with Danielle. I could tell you where I was, time of the day, and mostly everything. And I have to remember, and of course you provide notes, what came of that, but a lot of clarity. Chuck, before we get into the session, what brought you to Danielle? What was your goal? What was your expectation?
Well, 4 or 5 months ago, someone told me that I needed psychological help because I was like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, their words. And so I went to a mutual friend, and she does healing by tuning. And I met Danielle through Kim, and I scheduled this appointment. Now, I'm treated by the Veterans Administration. I was in Vietnam with the Marine Corps back in 69 and 70. And I do appreciate the Veterans Administration in Durham, North Carolina. The hospital is marvelous. They're good people. But the therapist I used to see in New York State where I lived, they have such a background and such a backload of people wanting to see them. You only get to see them so often, then it comes to an end. And I was troubled about the being said I'm a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So I'm carrying a lot of baggage from my childhood with my mother and father divorcing when I was 5. And then my mother, God bless her, she was a strong woman and working 2 and 3 jobs to support my sister and I. Then I went into the service, and for some reason, I was stationed in California with the 5th Tank Battalion, and it wasn't a bad gig, but Vietnam was going on, and I wanted to see what it was all about. So I volunteered an extra 2 years on my enlistment and went to Vietnam. And so I came back from Vietnam, and everything had changed. The economy, couldn't get a job. Father had died while I was in the service. Mother remarried, moved up to the Pennsylvania. I've been kicking around my whole life, working a lot of different jobs, just because of the PTSD. And I'm just trying to focus and be a lot more happy and trying to understand, things from my childhood don't matter. They don't matter anymore. And people that I may have hurt or done wrong, I'm sorry, but, You know, I'm now looking out for myself and people that make me unhappy by their actions, and they may not be on purpose, but I just trying to move away from that and lead a positive life. That's my story, Steve.
Oh,
And with Danielle, it just fantastic. It was, it's all drug free and it's spiritual, and I recommend it to everybody because I don't think psychiatrists have the answers. What I've seen, it's like when they ask you something and you say something, they're like, well, how do you feel about that? And it's like, well, shit. If they're asking you that, you could ask yourself that, like,
mm.
Chuck, how do you feel about that? And not have to pay these people hundreds of dollars an hour. So that's where we're at, Steve.
Well, and I totally relate to what you're talking about. And not to say that, psychiatrists and mental health practitioners, there isn't a place for them there. But I remember meeting with a therapist, going through a divorce. And every time I would talk with him, he would just talk about the logistics. Well, so how's court? Did it start? Blah, 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 blah. What about me? What about my feelings? That's why I'm calling you. So I do understand it. What, for you, Chuck, what came up today in your first session with Danielle that connects, I call it connecting the dots, now to back then, whenever then was?
Wow. I think it probably started back, back in the 50s. But a lot of tears came out, and it's a spiritual thing in a way. I know if I can go like outdoors, especially to the mountains out west, it's just I get such energy from that. But I have just letting it go. The people that I may have been in grade school with, that I did something wrong or something stupid, or we did something stupid. I shouldn't be worrying about that stuff. There's just too much introspecting going on in my life, worrying about something that was 50 years ago or 60 years ago. Then we go into the thought of Vietnam and being in the service. That carries its own stuff. But just a funny thing happened a week or so ago. I was asked a question by a woman that I'm friends with, and for some reason I went rambling on about a type of munition, white phosphorus rounds that were fired from the tank. And I was explaining this to her, and that hadn't been the question. And she was asking me, what did Mother J meant? And because I was answering it, I had sent her a text previously, and I said, well, it's short for motherfuckers, or mother jumpers, take your pick. But anyway, so I'm rambling on about white phosphorus rounds, and she replied back to me, well, you must be in your happy place. And that paused. I had to pause and think about that. Wow, I'm in a happy place because of Vietnam, and I've been thinking about that all week. And Nam wasn't a bad thing for me. I mean, I was shot at. I was hit with shrapnel. I know a lot of guys died, and the guys that were out there humping the bush, the clothes rotting off of them, and just crazy stuff. So that made me ponder. Yes, am I an action junkie? Do I need I need some excitement in my life? Could be. I don't know. But I know my body at 74 is keeping my brain intact, because my brain says, we can do this, Chuck. And my body's like, no, we can't, babe. Let's go do something else. So that's
do you think, Chuck, thinking back to time in Vietnam, that it wasn't just the action, but it was the connection, the camaraderie, brotherhood, that kind of thing? Do you think that has a part of it too?
Oh, yes, big time. Because if I'm at the American Legion, VFW Hall, or any place where there's other veterans, we have a connection. And it just, you go to the VA hospital, and there are people in a lot worse shape than me. But yeah, it's a connection. It is camaraderie. And being in Vietnam, you didn't have all the, excuse me, but chicken shit that you had stateside because, we had things to do and we were heavily armed. So I think it kept the senior NCOs and officers from making us paint rocks or pick up trash, which was a constant in the States because you have thousands of men and women and you need to keep them busy. So it's like, pick this up, pick that up. We're going to have an inspection, etc. In Vietnam, it was a better time. As far from my point of view, we weren't standing inspections. Uh, I liked Vietnam. I liked the people, a beautiful country that we hadn't, you know, bombed or sprayed Agent Orange on, but it wasn't bad. And I've never gone back. I don't have a desire to go back because I wouldn't recognize it. I can see on Google Earth places that I was that I wouldn't recognize. But yeah, I would say it was Steve. It was camaraderie, and it still is when you get together with a bunch of guys from the service. And I've tried. I know what kind of a welcome home we got. And so when I see the guys that came back from Afghanistan or Iraq, I try to encourage them to take care of themselves, seek help, file a claim if they were hurt. Um, and that's what's going on.
How did this present itself when you had the session with Danielle? Did she bring up things that energetically that she detected in you?
Oh yeah, it was Steve. She was picking up stuff and she hadn't even touched me. I was barely into her studio and she's saying, "Well, your left shoulder." Well, she's never seen my left shoulder. You want to see my left shoulder?
It's up to you.
Sure, there you do. See, that's my left shoulder. And there's also a scar there from the surgery I've had on it and everything. And she didn't know any of that stuff.
Wow. What did she say? And for anybody that's listening, you have what looks like a scar on your upper shoulder and it's covered by a tattoo. What kind of tattoo is that?
Well, that is a Hellcat from Dodge with the Hellcat edition of the SRT Hellcat. It's got a big engine in it, and it goes fast. And then the V is for Virgo, and there's Virgo that's still living, and my wife who died in 2020. That's her fallen. So anyway, yeah, it was just Virgo things, and
I take it you're a Virgo.
No, I'm a Libra.
Oh, okay.
I'd be
I'm a
very
Virgo. That's why I
cautious
ask.
about going with Virgos again, that's for sure. Because depending on what time they got born in that month, they could be an entirely different person.
And in the
My
Virgo
first
world?
wife was Virgo. A woman I was dating this past year was a Virgo, and it's night and day as to their attitude.
I'm going to validate what you said because I'm a Virgo and I'm plugged into Virgos. But I am going to say that they're different depending on the month, during the month when they were born.
Yeah.
And it's almost weird. Like 12 days, 15 days can make a difference. And it's still the same sign. I've never seen anything like that, but I see it.
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that.
Which is way, way over my pay grade.
Your ascending sign is actually how your personality presents, but you have 12 signs, and your placements in those signs represent different things also. But the time you were born and the year, and depending on the astrological events that happened during that time also affect it.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, Chuck, there are some good Virgos out there. Just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, I was married to one for 35 years. I understand that.
Yeah.
And the second one, her birthday was the 22nd, which is the last day of Virgodom before you get into the Libras. So, yeah, it was an intense relationship.
Yeah, I get you. Gemini's my, Stay away, Gemini. So just haven't had good luck. But anyway,
Thank you for that. Yeah.
everybody's different. We all experience different things. Uh,
Mhm.
Intriguing about the shoulder. What did Danielle say to you, Chuck? That where she picked up on that without seeing it.
I was surprised, Steve. And I'm like, what? I think there was some negativity, or there was some anger. It was a negative force in my left shoulder. Now the rotator cuff was all tore up and everything. And it actually rides higher than it should. And so, sometimes it'll click and clack when it's moving up and down out of place. And for them to repair it, I think they need a jawbone of an ass or something to make it right. I don't want to go through any surgery. The right one's tore up too, but it's just a lifetime of toting and carrying, and a few accidents, motorcycle and automotive, that have beat up the body a little bit. But I'm still
You
here.
just brought back a memory here, and I want your feedback on this, Danielle. But somebody told me that when you have discomfort in your left shoulder, it's usually caused by a woman. Now, this is an energy healer that told me this, okay? And I had a rotator cuff issue about a year and change ago. And I think it was maybe playing tennis, and it wasn't really that bad. I tried to get an MRI, it wasn't approved by insurance, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to ride this one out. 6 months later, it was okay. But that's what that person told me, and it was true. And I
Well,
don't know where that came up.
there's a couple things.
Mhm.
So, one, you're a male. The left shoulder runs with the heart chakra. The energy runs through there. And if you think about when someone has a heart attack, it's the heart down the left arm. That's
Mm.
the way the energy flows.
Mm.
The left side of the body is the feminine side. The right side of the body is the masculine side. So the active side, the more in tune, emotionally, spiritually nurturing side.
Hmm. Uh-huh. Interesting. And Chuck, you were referring to a challenging relationship, and I'm just
Yes.
saying,
Mhm.
it's like
Well, after Danielle said that, I'm like, I wonder if I could get this tattoo removed.
well, you could always change it into something else.
I was I was gonna run a chain down it and have the chain broken. It's like, you know, free at last, free at last.
I hear you.
That's good symbology.
What else came up for you today, Chuck, in your first session with Danielle? What are some of the things she said to you that maybe made you think, that connected to things from your past that maybe you didn't make a connection to previously?
Snakes. The snakes were brought up, and you know, Danielle didn't ask me about it, but she was, you know, placing a snakeskin around my head as I was laying on the bed. And I thought about it. I said, well, let's talk about snakes because I grew up in Missouri. And when we'd be out picnicking on the creeks or the rivers or anything like that, there are all kinds of snakes in Missouri. Um, and then I thought, well, they've all been going away from me. I've never been bothered by one, never been bit by one, been scared by them. And then when I was in Vietnam, we were at a place called Namo Bridge north of Da Nang where we guarded a bridge, and we were living in an old French bunker. And one time we were firing the cannon on the tank, and all the smoke, the cordite smoke, had apparently driven the snakes out of the ground around the bunker. And I'm outside, but the snakes are going away from me. They're going back into the ground. They're not coming after me. And so Danielle has some reference to snakes, and she read that to me. And it was kind of interesting.
And
What
this
she
is just
said.
random, just randomly she just brought up snakes.
Yeah, yeah, it was wild. And when you stop to think, it's like, yeah, there were snakes.
Wow.
I've been out hiking out in Arizona, little baby rattlesnakes on the trail, but they were pointing in the opposite direction of they were going that way. I was going this way. And I just don't understand it. But apparently, uh, there's something to do with snakes.
Danielle, what's going on there?
Well, it's shedding of the past,
Ah,
the life cycle coming for full circle, transmutation of energies, and going from lower to higher. So turning pain or things that happened that he wasn't happy about, processing it all the way through to transmute it to turn those to his strengths.
there's the shedding of the skin seems to be prominent in my mind for some reason. How does that translate to Chuck and his life?
It translates to shedding the things that he no longer needs to carry around as baggage anymore.
Now, he referred to even some kind of like incidences with his classmates in elementary school, things that he just remembered that apparently he's still carrying with him. Did that stuff come up, and was there a way to help him release that?
Yes, it came up. And is it okay to share?
You go right ahead.
Okay. So it came up for him as we were working, and it really impacted his heart chakra. And I received messages about his being worthy and not believing that and carrying that blame and that shame, not forgiving himself. So we received some messages that were spoken to him that helped him as I worked spiritually, helped him to process and helped remove those energies. And he removed them through his energetic field and through tears and through his vocalization.
Wow. And I don't know the situations from back then, don't even need to know, but it almost sounds like they weren't major things. They were just things that and I'm bringing that up just to illustrate how I got bullied on the playground, things like that stay with you and change your life as an adult in terms of you feeling worthy. You turn into a people pleaser, maybe a perfectionist, because you're trying to show people that you have value because you got beat down when you were 6, 7 years old, whatever it might be. And we carry that stuff. So it
Right.
sounds kind of like something like that from elementary school.
Yes. And after his parents divorced when he was a child, his mother did the best that she could, but she was working all the time. And he was, as he called it, a latchkey.
I was a
Latchkey
latchkey kid before it was popular. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he essentially was spending most of his time alone because she was gone working. The absence was also absence of love, of nurturing, of guidance. So he made a lot of decisions on his own as a child by what he experienced in that child's lens and that child's knowledge. So he also learned by what happened to him and what he saw. For example, is it okay to talk about the bike?
Go right ahead.
Okay. For example, in his youth, he had someone steal his bike. As he grew older, he did the same thing in return. And that stuff is stuff you carry. And I hope that today he's able to forgive himself.
Yeah, I can make a joke about it now, But she left out the part about stealing cars, Steve, and how that started. I was 15 years old, and my mother found condoms in my dresser drawer, and I guess she was going through menopause at the time. I don't know, but she's like, "What are these for?" Because of the young lady that lives downstairs. in one of the apartments we rent. That's what they're for, Mom. But anyway, she chased me out of the house and got with my best friend Steve, and we were out bumming around, and the buses stopped running, and we're out in St. Louis County, and we didn't feel like walking back, so we found a car with the keys in it, and we took it for a joyride. And did I go straight home? No, it was a nice car. We out cruising around pretty soon. We're at a stop, four-way stop, and Steve's like, "Get on it." Well, we didn't see the cop car off to our right,
Oof.
so they get behind us, and I'm going to say, "Well, let me turn in here." It turned out to be a street blocked by a chain, so I whip back in front of the cops. The pursuit starts, and we got away from the cops, and then we pulled into a gas station, threw it in park, and we tear ass down an alley. Well, the cops, are behind us, shooting at us, and we split up and eventually got home. But that was my introduction into car thievery, and we went on to about five or six more cars, and I did not even have a driver's license. So when it the car that we had, young lady left her letter in it, so it led them to the girl that had not mailed the letter. And I told the cops, I said, leave her out of it. I'll take the rap. And so I had to see a probation officer for a while. And like I say, I didn't have a driver's license that they could suspend. So life went on, and the parole officer got bored with me because I guess I wasn't that exciting. I had no problem with that. And that was the end of my law breaking and stuff. I had been given a buy on that, and I was good to go.
You got to pass. It sounds like you got to pass. Get out of free jail card.
Yeah.
What's going on there, Danielle? I know this is not a therapy session, but energetically, he had the bike that was stolen when he was very young, and he kind of repeated that pattern. Would you say, was he looking for restitution in his mind, or was he just going back to a comfortable place?
That would be something he would have to answer.
I don't know, Steve. I just, I have no idea. St. Louis still is maybe, or was back and then. It was, people, you hanging your laundry outside in the backyard. You had to watch that because there was just a bunch of thieving going on. When I came back from Vietnam, the family was all moved and everything, but I had an apartment and I was getting ready to move up to Pennsylvania and bringing my two duffel bags down from the apartment. By the time I got back down with the second one, somebody had already stole the first one out of my car. So it just is what it is or was. And, nobody pressed charges. We were lucky, and most of the most of the guys in the eighth grade class were hauled down to second precinct, and because they were all involved joyriding in the cars, so they rounded everybody up and put us all in a jail cell, which became like a monkey cage. We're just laughing, joking, and stroking, which the cops did not find humorous and stuff.
Wow.
I would just like to say the thing that I'm hearing very strongly right now is that we become products of our environments.
Yeah. Yep. And I think very impactful here is the way, and mom did the best she could.
She did, Steve.
I was in the same situation, to be very transparent.
Yeah.
My parents got divorced. They were starting to get divorced before I was even born. I learned in the last couple of years. And, and my sibling, a sister, and my mom, did the best she could. But that makes an impact on you, even that and so much more.
Yeah, my father, he was in World War II and Korea, and mom said it was Korea that did him in, and he became a weekend drunk. Hardworking man, a metal finisher, craftsman, great guy, but come Friday, he'd start drinking. And I shared with Danielle some of the My first episode. Oh,
Oh, no.
what?
Is your knee tight right now?
My name?
Uh-huh.
No, I just always I crossed it. Anyway, um,
He's blocking energy, isn't he?
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm feeling it big time.
Anyway, my dad bought me a swing set. It was in our backyard. Well, it turns out our landlord lived in the house next door to us, and Dad had spent the rent money on me a swing set. Swing set ended up next door, so I could watch the kid next door swing on my swing set, and that kind of set a tone and stuff like that.
Isn't it amazing that the things, Chuck, that we dealt with that could be, insignificant to many in our childhood, pilots us, is in us
Yeah.
energetically. And until you eradicate it or deal with it, you hang on to it, and it changes the way you operate as an adult. Were you aware of that before you got together with Danielle?
Well, it's been within the last few years, I got to thinking about that, and a lot of stuff that we the three of us are sharing right now, I've never told anyone, and I related that where we were living in St. Louis was, brick buildings, townhouses or whatever you call them. But my aunt lived upstairs. Aunt and uncle lived upstairs. And my aunt was watching me. Mom was working. Dad was working. There was a young girl my age that came up. Well, I had been downstairs, and she had a beer bottle, and she broke it on a metal railing and stabbed me right between the eyes and stuff, and said that she had seen that on a TV program last night, probably with Gunsmith or Gunsmoke or something like that. I don't know. Then a few days later, she comes up the stairs from the backyard that I'm sitting on and starts slapping me with a dishcloth. And I had a distinct, I really wanted to kick her down the stairs, but I didn't for fear of hurting her, which is really stupid. You know, I should have kicked her. But anyway, I didn't. You know, that's just one of the little childhood things.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating talking to both of you today. Especially, I had no idea that this was your first session, Chuck.
Yeah.
So getting it from the beginning, and it sounds like you're going to be doing for future sessions.
Oh gosh, yes. Put that
Wow.
leg down, Chuck.
I'm gonna
Put
work
that
on
leg down.
just a minute.
It's because with the VA, I've been to the behavioral people, and they got time enough for everybody, and if they can assure that you're not going to kill yourself, they move you on just because there's so many people waiting to see them and everything. So
Right.
I'm much more comfortable in this setting and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, but you're seeing things that you may not have seen, or maybe they were buried. Even as you're talking, you're sparking memories in my mind from my childhood, and
That's
it's
all,
not
Steve.
that I forgot about them, but it's like, oh, now it just came to the front, based on some of the things that you're saying. Like even the playground, that just popped in my head. I wasn't doing the same stuff you were, different lives, obviously, but we learn from our stories. And we're out of time. I could just keep going. It's so interesting and fascinating. And I'm gratified that you found some answers, at least initial answers, Chuck, in talking with Danielle.
Well, I have, and prior to the three of us having this conversation, we're downstairs and getting a coffee, but it talked about downsizing. Now, 2018, I moved from upstate New York out to Raton, New Mexico, where my wife and I were living. She died of pancreatic cancer in 2020. And because of the altitude we were at, it was causing me to have heart attacks with the didn't have enough oxygen for the blood oxygen level, and it was causing heart attacks. So I had to move. But when I finally moved to North Carolina, I still had stuff that hadn't been unpacked from the move from New York State, and I still have that stuff. And it's been 4 years, and I think I need to get rid of the stuff. But if I haven't used it, I don't need it. But gosh, I hate to get rid of it because that's neat stuff. And I gotta do something.
Well, for another conversation, but I think Danielle will address this at some other point.
Yes.
Stuff has energy, and maybe you need to evaluate whether you want that energy.
Right.
Listen, I'm going home. I'm going to sage later today just because I haven't done it in a while. And, some of my furniture is left over from previous relationships. So every once in a while, I'm like, let's just freshen it up around here. Danielle, how do we find you? Somebody wants to start a conversation. Maybe this is resonating with them. How do they connect to you?
They can connect through my website, hellofuturehealing.com, and you can schedule a free consultation. And I'm also on Facebook, Danielle Marie. 2 names are put together in one, and then White.
Gotcha. Thank you both for today and the insight that we learned, and especially again, this being a first session. It's so fresh, things that have come up, and I'm sure there's going to be future things in other sessions that you do with Danielle. Thank you both for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
Have a wonderful, lovely day.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the mytuner-radio, online radio box, and simpleradio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.